Hello everyone. So today I am back with my new video which is Emily's Mysticism. As I have mentioned in my previous video that Emily Dickinson is a very well-known poetess of English literature. So today what we will cover are about the poetess first and then what is mysticism, then Emily's mysticism and at last conclusion as we always do. So, first is Emily's introduction. She was born on December 10, 1830 in Amherst, Massachusetts, US and died on 15th May 1886 at the age of 55 in Amherst, Massachusetts, US. By occupation, she was a poetess. Alma mater was Mount Holyoke Female Seminary, and notable works were I Test Liquor Never Brewed, Because I Could Not Stop for Death. So, these are her most famous notable works. Next slide is about mysticism. Before we go with the what is Emily's mysticism, we should know what is mysticism first. So, mysticism involves a deep, almost obsessive concern with such problems as death, the existence of the soul, immortality, the existence of God and heaven, salvation or redemption, etc. Mysticism also means the capacity to establish a spiritual contact with God. Next is about Emily's mysticism, as our title is. So, we will cover 12 points here. Let's study one by one. First is no desire for union with God in her poetry. Her speculation was imaginative and entirely based upon sensory experience. Such thoughts are found in great streets of silence led away. I went to heaven, I died for beauty, safe in their alabaster chambers, and ample make this bed, and what in is this, as well as many others. So she actually does not have any kind of desire for union with the God in her poetry. She is just talking about the mysticism. Next slide is about reference to Christ. Christ here refers to Jesus Christ. References to Christ in the poems of Miss Dickinson are usually not directly concerned with the person of Christ, but rather with some symbol, as seen the following stanza from her poem, I should have been too glad I see. Defeat waits victory, they say, the reefs in old Gatsman endure the shore beyond. The aforementioned words suggest that the speaker in the poem is not afraid of death and considers death as a victory rather than defeat of the soul. Thus, defeat in the form of death becomes a victory. The reason for this interpretation is that the dead would go to heaven, which is better place than earth. So see, she is also actually tired with the materialistic things, and that is why she is thinking that she does not have actually having any kind of fear of death, and she thinks that actually it is a victory of a soul if a person dies. So references to Christ is done. Now next is about faith and religious conviction. Many of Miss Dickinson's poems are certainly concerned with the Creator, the Redeemer, with death and immortality. Her view of immortality is best illustrated by what has been stated by Fleck, who believed that Chase finds it meaningful to account for her attitude towards immortality by relating it to Gnosticism. According to him, this extraordinary generalization of immortality outside of history, church, and dogma clearly has the quality of Gnosticism. So faith and religious conviction is also found in her, in her mysticism. Okay, next is about the methodology of mysticism. Mystic literature is most often concerned with the methodology of mysticism. To describe the unity way is a task which has proved impossible with most mystics. But the way of purgation, especially, has given rise to some very graphic mystical writing. In both Christian and non Christian mystical literature, there is a deliberate withdrawal from the external things of life in order that attention may be concentrated on the one thing necessary. Next is about no true mystic quest in her poetry. In Miss Dickinson's poetry, we do not need find that intense sensitivity to experience which is characteristic of the mystic. Duncan is the opinion that Dickinson's self chosen isolation from the world might easily be interpreted as the retirement for contemplation, which is a mystic practices. But the writing which came out of this solitude does not tell the story of the mystic quest. Next slide is about her poetic goal. Intellectual discipline in Miss Dickinson means precision of thought and an adequate relationship of the unique happening to its place in her scheme of things. It is the withdrawal into contemplation by which the mystic seeks to establish contact with ultimate reality. So, this is her poetic goal. Next is mystical inclined. As has been said by Galpy, although Miss Dickinson was not a philosopher nor even a consistent thinker, she strikingly illuminated the hidden recesses in the human soul. Unlike most American poets, she was religiously oriented. A glance at her themes reveals an extreme preoccupation with the effect of death, the nature of the soul, the problems of immortality, the possibility of faith, and the reality of God. So, in her mysticism, we find she mystically inclined. Her Calvinistic upbringing. So, see, although later influenced by Transcendentalism, Miss Dickinson was reared in an Orthodox tradition where biblical truths were stated in Calvinistic terms. Nor did she ever eradicate the hardcore of these beliefs from her philosophy. The basic Calvinistic approach maintained that man was depraved and conditioned to evil by origin sin, and that was utterly dependent on God for any good that he might accomplish. Next is about a rebel against religious orthodoxy. In 19th century Amherst, these Calvinistic beliefs were not so rigidly enforced, and anyone who so desired could declare his own justification and became one of the elect. All that was needed was a willingness to attend church regularly and to manifest a moral life. Even this as too much for Miss Dickinson. So, we find a rebel against religious orthodoxy in her mysticism. Next slide is about a testing of soul in the fire of pain. Dickinson's poetry typified the moral earnestness of the old Puritans with their confidence that the human soul could overcome imperfection through struggle and self discipline. She clearly perceived that the soul's inner reality contained true value, not the external world of nature. Like Thoreau, she felt that each individual must strip life down to its bare bones and taste for himself its essence, sweet or bitter. Next is about a mixture of Puritan and freethinker. So, like Emerson, Miss Dickinson was from the beginning, and she remained all her life, a singular mixture of Puritan and freethinker. The problems of good and evil, of life and obsessed her, the nature and destiny of the human soul, and Emerson's theory of compensation toward God, as one of the earliest critics is reported to have said, she exhibited an Emersonian self possession. Indeed, she did not and could not accept the Puritan God at all. So she was a mixture of Puritan and freethinker. Next, mystical in her reverence for nature. Her real reverence, the reverence that entitles her to be regarded as a mystical poet, was reserved for nature, which seemed to her a more obvious and a more beautiful evidence of the divine will than creeds and churches. Many of Miss Dickinson's conventional nature poems praise nature as the gentlest mother who soothes and comforts her bruised children. In these poems, she delights in nature's external pageantry and expresses a sentimental enthusiasm about the red breast of the robin and the butterfly's beautiful colors. So, before we move on to conclusion, I would like to share something more about Emily Dickinson. Actually, she was the poetess of English literature who observed nature very, very carefully, as because she used to live in the upper portion of her home, where she used to observe each and every minute thing about the nature, and this is how she wrote such beautiful poems like I taste liquor never brewed and so many. So, as conclusion, I would like to share something more about her. Emily Dickinson wrote about what she knew and about what intrigued her. A keen observer, she used images from nature, religion, law, music, commerce, medicine, fashion, and domestic activities to probe universal themes. The wonders of nature, the identity of the self, death, and immortality and love. So actually, she used to get some depression also, as she used to live in the one room at her upper portion of the house and observe only the nature. So she used to get sometimes depression also, and we see in her some of her poems that kind of depression. But she is actually a very keen observer of nature and a very well known, poetess for, or very well known, you can say, person of English literature who observed nature very keenly and very, soulfully, we can say. So this is all about today. Thank you so much for now, and bye to all.